for your next project, the first step is going to be taking your board and making sure it's ready for you to do the layout. When you get the board, your two sides are flat, your two edges are straight and parallel, but you don't know about the ends. So before you do your layout, you want to make sure this end is square, 90 degrees to your edges. So for that, you're going to use a chop saw. Now you've already gone through the safety steps for the chop saw, and so you're ready to use it. When you use this tool, you need me standing next to you watching you do it. This isn't one that you go off and use on your own. So we're going to line this up on the chop saw, and our goal here is to take off as little as possible the whole length of the board. So we're going to line this up and make sure it'll cut in the back and in the front. And remember, when we make our cut with this saw, you want to plunge in, so you don't want to come all the way past it and then slide into the board. You want to plunge into it and make sure you cut through the front and then slide back after that. So the board's down, it's tight against the fence, it's tight against the table. I'm going to bring it front to where I want to plunge, start it up, go down, and then back. Then let this all stop, lift it out of the way. So now we know this edge is 90 degrees to these. So now we're ready for our layout. So using these 90-degree edges, I'm going to measure and lay out my triangles. I'm going to start by making marks at 1 inch and at 8 inches. That gives me a 7-inch side for my triangle, but keeps me a little bit off of the edge for my measurements. I'm also going to mark the middle of the 1 and the 8, so that's 4.5 inches. 4.5 inches puts me 3.5 from that side and 3.5 from that side. This is one side of my triangle. To get the other two sides, I have to measure straight up from that mark in the middle. So I'm going to draw this line, use my square, and draw a line straight up all the way across my board. That's called the bisector of the triangle because it cuts it in half. On that bisector, to get a 7-inch by 7-inch by 7-inch equilateral triangle, you have to measure up 6 inches. So if I measure up 6 inches and make a mark, that's the top of my triangle. So that I connect that mark to the 1-inch mark I made, and I connect that mark to the 8-inch mark that I made. And here I have my equilateral triangle that is 7 inches on each side. Next, I need to lay out where the holes are going to go on my triangle. So to do that, my holes are going to be in rows 1 inch apart. So I'm going to measure along my bisector there, and I'm going to make marks at 1 inch, 2 inches, 3 inches, 4 inches, and 5 inches. And then the reason we made sure this was 90 degrees is so that we can measure off of that and get straight lines across our triangle at each of those measurements. So now I got to flip this over so that I have enough to hook onto over here. So now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows, which is where my holes will line up. To mark those holes, I'm going to use a ruler. You want to measure from the bisector, because that's the middle of your triangle here. And it really doesn't matter what number you put on that bisector. You just want to make sure you have a whole inch measurement there and that your ruler reaches both sides. So I'm going to use 4 just because that feels comfortable. The lowest row of holes has 5 holes. So I'm going to mark right here in the middle, and then I'm going to go 1 inch and 1 inch to this side, and I'm going to go 1 inch and 1 inch to this side. Now for the next row, I want them to be in the gaps in between these 2 holes. So in between the whole inches are the halves. So I'm going to slide up to the next row. I'm not going to mark one in the middle because there's an even number, and I'm going to mark it to halves. So I'll mark it 1/2 and 1.5 from the center, and 1/2 and 1.5 from the center. Now the 3 holes is like the 5 holes, 1 in the middle, and then 1 inch and 1 inch. We'll put them in between these 2. The 2 holes are like the 4 holes, 1/2 and 1/2 to each side, and the last one is right in the center. So now I have the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 whole rows for my game, all laid out and ready to go, and I have my triangle. So the next thing that we'll do is we'll go over and drill these holes while we still have a nice big board to hold on to.